giving you everything you need to fight the Trump administration. This is The Bill Press Show, live at youtube.com/The Bill Press Show.
It is The Bill Press Show here on a Friday, March 30th. Folks, my name is Peter Ogburn. I am sitting in for Bill Press today. Don't worry, though. We have lots of great guests who are going to join us. Jack Jenkins from the Religion News Service, Alexi McCammond from Axios, and Emily Atkin from the New Republic will all be in studio today. And gosh, I couldn't be more excited about it. And I couldn't be more excited to be here with you to talk about the news of the day, as nightmarish as it may be. Yesterday was one of those days where Donald Trump sort of got the news cycle back and was out there taking all kinds of credit for the success of Roseanne Barr's new TV show, which, he was on the road talking about infrastructure again, but we're gonna make it through. We're gonna get through today's show, and I appreciate you joining us. By the way, it's Easter weekend. We're on Easter weekend already. I don't know if it's because I'm a bad father or I just don't care very much, but I just don't get into the Easter thing. Ray, you have a little baby.
I do. I mean, we're doing some Easter stuff. Like, we're having a brunch tomorrow with family, and we're going to dye eggs.
Yeah?
Yeah.
All right, that's fun. See, the egg thing is fun at the age that your baby is now.
I mean, she's tiny, so she can't really do it. It's going to be me doing it with my nephews. But
still, she can get involved a little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
It's not going to be like she's going to be gorging herself on candy like my kids would do. But here's the thing. A new study came out from the World Health Organization. How much sugar is in your child's Easter basket?
Are you giving raisins to Grand Magnus this
Okay,
week?
We don't do Easter baskets.
Well, there you go. So there's zero sugar in your children's
We'll
Easter
do
basket.
an Easter treat. First of all, the king of most candies, Halloween or otherwise, is the Reese's peanut butter egg.
My heart almost dropped for a second because I thought you were going to say Cadbury cream eggs, which are trash.
No, they're the worst candy that you could possibly get.
Trash.
Cadbury cream eggs are horrendous.
They are.
Horrendous.
They are.
Don't give them to your kids.
No.
They're terrible. But the Reese's peanut butter egg, or the Reese's peanut butter egg.
How is it different than just a Reese's peanut butter cup?
I'm glad you asked.
Okay.
So the chocolate is a little bit thicker.
Okay.
The chocolate walls are a little bit thicker, and you've got more ratio. You got more room for peanut butter because of the oblong shape. It's a higher concentration.
I'll have to try one, but I think that the ratio is pretty perfected as it is. But actually, the shallow ones I like less than the squatter, smaller ones. So maybe I would like the egg.
You'd
like
the egg.
Maybe.
Trust me.
All right, I'll try.
Trust me. You'd like the egg. Well, here's the thing, though. If you are giving your kids the traditional, overflowing basket of Easter candy, there are 900 grams of sugar.
Oh, no.
In the traditional Easter basket. By the way, what could you also give your kids that have that much sugar in it? Just for a little perspective, 90 chocolate chip cookies. 90 chocolate chip cookies, or 23 cans of soda.
Did they say what's included in this average Easter basket?
Jelly beans.
Okay.
Marshmallow chicks, which are like the Peeps. Peanut butter eggs.
Okay.
And the hard shell.
Hearts.
The eggs. It's just milk
right.
chocolate surrounded with the chocolate shell, which are trash.
I don't mind those, actually. When I was little, I always looked forward to that because it came in a mini egg carton, and they looked like eggs in an egg carton. It was so cute.
Trash. They are trash. They break your teeth. They're so hard. Anyway, just maybe give your kids, I don't know, some salad. or how about this? Some fruit. Or one peanut butter egg.
A hard-boiled egg next to a peanut butter egg?
Yes, exactly. Just give them some egg whites. What's wrong with you? It's the Bill Press Show. Stay tuned.
on your radio, on TV, and online. This is The Bill Press Show.
It is the Bill Press Show. My name is Peter Ogburn, sitting in for Bill Press today on this Friday, March 30th. Thank you for tuning in. No matter where you're listening, viewing, consuming, wherever you are, we thank you for doing it. Of course, you can listen to us on your favorite progressive talk radio station. Shout out to our friends at WCPT in Chicago, which, by the way, Bill will be there next week to talk about his new book. Details on our Twitter feed, our website, and also the WCPT. Check out their feed. We're also at Free Speech TV if you're watching us. It's a great way to get the show. And remember, we have our YouTube channel, youtube.com/The Bill Press Show. Also, if you are someone who listens religiously, even if you are someone who listens to both hours of the show in Chicago or Asheville or Indiana Talks, which wherever you're listening, however you're pulling it together, we have our podcast, which has stuff that you cannot hear on those radio stations. There's some pre-show stuff. There's some before we get into the meat of the show that we kick some stuff around, and you can really only listen to that on the podcast. So go check it out, the Bill Press Show in iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. We're there for you. For example, today we were talking a little bit about Easter. Easter is coming up. By the way, this is sort of like the big holiday for Christians, right? Because this is like the thing that separates you from other religions, right? You believe that Jesus came back, right? I'm not a Christian. I was steeped in it as a child. But here's the thing. I guess it really doesn't matter because the Pope has come out and said hell doesn't exist.
You know, I love this Pope more and more and more, and I 100% agree with him.
Well, I'm glad that the story came out because we're going to be talking to our friend Jack Jenkins from the Religion News Service in a little while, and I want to get his take on it. What he says is, I'm reading directly from cnsnews.com, quote, Pope Francis claims that hell does not exist and condemned souls just disappear. This is a denial of the 2,000-year-old teaching of the Catholic Church about the reality of hell and the eternal existence of the soul. Now, the thing is, like, having grown up in a Southern Baptist church, everything that I did that was good and pure as a child was solely so that I would not go to hell. Like, yes. That's what they teach you. You got to. It's like the boogeyman, right? Behave, or God's not going to save your soul, and you're gonna go to hell.
I amend my former statement, though. I do not believe that "quote unquote" bad souls disappear.
Yeah, sure.
I think you're reincarnated.
Do you really?
I do.
Well, that's a whole separate topic. But, like, if you've spent your whole life going through the religion racket because you're scared of going to hell, the Pope, maybe the best authority that lives and walks among us, is saying, I wouldn't sweat it. You're not gonna, there's no hell. There's nothing to be scared of.
But see, I love this argument because it gets rid of this punitive God, and instead it's like, be good because then you have access to an all-loving God.
Yes. Now, as I mentioned, I am not religious because seriously, all when I was growing up, the only thing that we were taught was the punitive God. Like, God will punish you, and we should be God-fearing. And, like, the construct of how so many things are set up among the family come directly from that weird teaching that you better behave yourself or this sky principal is going to get mad at you and like put you in detention.
I had such a bizarre religious path. So I grew up going to a mixture of public school and then Catholic school.
Oof.
And so I was confirmed in baptized and confirmed Catholic. But my high school that I went to was very non-traditional Catholic. Many of the teachers were very socially liberal, supported gay marriage, did not believe that you should be excommunicated if you're divorced, all kinds of like socially progressive things. So
which should not be quite so radical, but within the church it's fairly radical.
It's fairly radical. But see, I was presented with this differing view of Catholicism, that you could still fundamentally be Catholic, and that these conservative teachings weren't central to the church,
right.
which is so different from how the church is typically presented.
Yeah, look, I mean, the way that church was presented to me and to a lot of people I grew up with was basically like, if you're not good, your soul will be damned for all of eternity. And look, like, I totally bought that hook, line, and sinker for a while. And like I said, I don't know the last time I set foot into a church. I honestly couldn't tell you.
So I'm curious, how come you still celebrate Easter then? Is it just more like a cultural thing?
I don't really celebrate Easter.
Right.
We don't really do the Easter bath. We don't. Like, it's not a thing.
But you do Easter eggs.
No.
Yes, you do. You just said you did peanut butter Easter eggs.
Oh, those don't count as Easter eggs. No. We don't dye Easter eggs, do that whole thing. But I will eat a peanut butter Easter egg.
I mean, you can get on board sort of with like the pagan side of Easter as just being spring revival, right?
Yeah, sure. Like, I do appreciate that part of it. But like, I eat chocolate covered matzah too. But I'm not Jewish.
Right.
Like, I'm in it for the food, right? Like, Easter lamb, ham, like, bring it on, man. I'm all for it. Like, I don't care. I don't buy the religion aspect of it all. But like, any chance to celebrate anything with food, I'm there. So peanut butter eggs, it's a yes for me.
It's a yes?
It's a yes for me all day long.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that you have to believe in Easter to celebrate peanut butter eggs.
Listen to her. She's very wise. Very wise words. But by the way, on the religion front, one of my least favorite people on God's great earth is Laura Ingraham, who is on Fox News. And I just, for the life of me, I cannot understand why there are people in the media and people I had a friend of mine who is a conservative talk smack about the Parkland shooting victims, and particularly the thing that Laura Ingraham is in trouble over is David Hogue, who you've seen. He's been out there. He's one of the leading voices, along with Emma Gonzalez and lots of other really sharp, smart, educated students. And there has been a story that's been kicking around the right-wing blogosphere about how David Hogue has not been accepted to the college of his choice. And so Laura Ingraham said on her show and on Twitter tweeting out a story about how David Hogue rejected by 4 colleges to which he applied and whines about it. That's the headline. David Hogue rejected by 4 colleges to which he applied and whined about it. She also said he was dinged by UCLA because he had a 4.1 GPA. Totally predictable given the acceptance rates. So people immediately swung into action saying, like, look, for all this talk that Republicans immediately jump to when anybody that's under the age of 30 gets attacked because of their conservative views, because they're saying, oh, kids are off limits, kids are off limits. So David Hogue, who is a high school student, is getting beat up by a Fox News host because his grades are he has a 4.1 GPA. Laura Ingraham, who every appearance that she makes wears a cross around her neck to let everybody know what a godly and Christian woman she is.
Maybe bad souls do disappear.
Maybe bad souls do disappear, Ray. She immediately was met with a pushback from a lot of different people. David Hogue himself actually tweeted about this on Wednesday, earlier in the week. He tweeted, pick a number 1 through 12 and contact the company that I've listed. And he lists 12 different companies: Sleep Number, AT&T, Bayer, Rocket Mortgage, Liberty Mutual, Arby's, TripAdvisor, Nestle, Hulu, Wayfair, a couple of different others. And it says, these are Laura Ingraham's advertisers. Call them and let them know that you are pissed off that she is picking on a high school student that watched his best friends get slaughtered by a weapon of war while he was supposed to be at school. That's who Laura Ingraham is. That's who Laura Ingraham is. Okay? That's the goblin that she is. So, immediately she faces a boycott. Immediately some of her advertisers drop her. And she tweeted yesterday, on reflection, in the spirit of Holy Week, which gag me with an entire place setting. That is disgusting. But let me read the tweet. On reflection, in the spirit of Holy Week, I apologize for any upset or hurt my tweet caused him or any of the brave victims in Parkland. For the record, I believe my show was the first to feature David immediately after that horrific shooting and even noted how poised he was given the tragedy. Oh, thank you, Laura. That's so nice of you. As always, he's welcome to return to the show anytime for a productive discussion. Grotesque. If I wasn't on camera right now, I'd be vomiting everywhere. Just disgusting. Just disgusting. What is wrong with these people? And look, David Hogue is not out there saying, take everybody's guns away. Let's get rid of the Second Amendment. It's not, he's not some radical. He's out there saying, look, we got a problem and you got to fix it. We've got a problem and you, the politicians, you've got to fix it. And if you want to hide behind the fact that this is really hard, where? This is a really hard problem to solve, where? Then you should get out of office because that's the reason you're in office is so you can fix these problems. I don't think that he's some revolutionary or reactionary, this David Hogue. He's out there just saying, look, we've got to have some sort of solution here. And if you can't do it, God damn it, we'll find somebody who will. But yeah, let's mock him for his 4.1 GPA, by the way, is not that shabby.
Okay, first of all, a 4.1 GPA, typically, you can only get it if you're taking advanced placement or IB courses, which are college level. And you get straight A's, by the way. Secondly,
I never had a 4.1 GPA, never in my life. Go ahead.
Okay. But secondly, something that is admirable about these Parkland kids is that they actually have made this a nonpartisan issue.
Yes.
They never once put this at the feet of the GOP or praise the way the Democrats are handling this or really attack either party. They've made it and kept it completely nonpartisan as a means of reaching as many people as possible.
Yep.
That this is not about whether you are a Republican or a Democrat or somewhere in between. It's about kids being mowed down with weapons of war in a place where they are meant to be learning. That's all that it is about.
There has never been a school shooting where someone walked in and said, quick show of hands, who here is a Democrat? Okay? I don't care if you're a Republican, if you're a Democrat, if you voted for Jill Stein, if you're a socialist. I don't care where you fall in the political spectrum. If you should be completely freaked out at what we've done to this country and what we've done to our children because of our drunkenness on guns.
Yes. I think that Emma Gonzalez actually said it best during the CNN town hall when she asked the NRA spokesperson Dana Loesch a question, and Dana, of course, just gave her sort of this runaround non-answer. Yeah. And then Emma just simply responds, I just want you to know that we're going to protect your children in a way that you won't.
Yeah. That's heavy.
That's heavy. It has nothing to do with politics. It has everything to do with the fact that Sandy Hook happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tiny babies were killed by guns, and we're not doing anything about it.
We're not doing a damn thing about it. And so, look, you if you find the kids from Parkland annoying, fine, whatever. I think it says a lot more about you than it does about the actual issue. But, we've got to address this problem. We can't keep running from this problem just because it's the solutions that we may have to deal with are hard. It's something that's got to be dealt with, and we've ignored it for so long. And this next generation, they're not going to ignore it, and that makes me pretty happy. That we might not see it next year, year after that, or the next election cycle, or whatever, but it's coming. It's coming, and I don't think that there are a lot of people out there that's saying, look, I'm one of the people that says take all the guns. I don't care. I don't care if you have a gun or not. Take them all. I really don't care. But none of these students are saying that. They're just like, look, we've got to figure this out. We shouldn't have automatic weapons in the hands of, frankly, anybody, but certainly people who have a history of problems. We just have to figure this out. By the way, we're on Twitter at BP Show, at BP Show. Joe Howard says, I want someone to ask Laura Ingraham, what if it were not Holy Week? Would your capacity to apologize exist? Joe, it's a very good question. The answer, of course, is no, because Laura Ingraham can only hide behind that cross that she has hanging around her neck. These people are goblins. Just total goblins.
I have a real problem with people using religion and God as a way to strike fear into people's hearts, as a way to advance their own political agenda.
Yeah.
Just don't even get me started on that. But, on the topic of Laura Ingraham and attacking these Parkland kids, and David especially, I know that we wanted to talk about Roseanne.
I did want to get there. No, I do want to get there. Because I mentioned yesterday during the show that Roseanne had huge numbers on the reboot of her show. Now, Ray, let me ask you, because you're younger than I am. Do you remember the Roseanne TV show, or are you familiar with it?
I do. I liked it, actually, when I was little. I mean, I'm sure that most of it went over my head, but I do remember watching it and thinking it was funny.
Yeah, so Roseanne Barr, I think, made a name for herself back in the 80s, 90s, for being a shock comic, right? And for being a female shock comic, which is something that a lot of people hadn't seen before. And the Roseanne show, I think, was not crazy. I think it was a good show. I think it showed a lot of people, it was a comedy, a situation comedy centered on, a working class family. It had a lot of their own problems and all that type of stuff. So anyway, they rebooted it. They brought it back. So Roseanne had the debut of her show, and it had 18 million views. That's how many people watched it live when it came back. 18 million viewers. Now, in case you have fallen off the radar with who Roseanne is and who she's been in the recent years, Roseanne has sort of fallen off the deep end. And by that, I mean she has been a Trump supporter for a while. She has tweeted conspiracy theories about Donald Trump. After he won the election, she bought into the whole Pizzagate story about the pedophile pizza parlor. She just reading the Washington Post collected a series of her tweets from who she has been over the years. Here she says, every single attack on Donald Trump, this is after he was president, every single attack on Donald Trump is really a disguised attack on American voters who rejected Obama, Clinton, Bush's bleeding of the Treasury, which is wrong. She says, J. Edgar Comey, millions of feminists marching in support of women's subordination and lefties opposing Russia. Great time for my new old TV show. That was back in June of 2017.
Can you repeat that? Feminists marching
in support of women's subordination and lefties opposing Russia. Great time for my new old TV show. That was almost a year ago, June of 2017.
I hope the Pope is right. I hope the bad souls do disappear.
She also, I mentioned Pizzagate, and journalists are being attacked by Think Progress and Media Matters. She tweeted about the Seth Rich cover-up. All right, so my point in all this is Roseanne is not a credible source for anything. Okay? Anything. But because she had such a big night the other night, it was so big that Donald Trump called her. By the way, totally normal brain on our totally normal president who went out to go talk about infrastructure and things like that. And the thing he wanted to talk about was a phone call he got from Mark Burnett, his Hollywood producer friend that produced The Apprentice, about how great Roseanne's ratings were. Totally normal brain on our totally normal president.
Even look at Roseanne. I called her yesterday. Look at her ratings. Look at her ratings. I got a call from Mark Burnett. He did The Apprentice. He's a great guy. He said, Donald, I called just to say hello and to tell you. Did you see Roseanne's ratings? I said, Mark,
Get out of here.
they were unbelievable. Over 18 million people. And it was about us. They haven't figured it out. The fake news hasn't quite figured it out. They have not figured it out.
So, like, completely bonkers, completely insane that this is where we are with our totally normal president with a very, very, very normal brain. Roseanne yesterday. Let me just say this first of all. I'm glad that Roseanne's show is back on. There has been some discussion about the fact that this is a situation comedy that is centered on a Trump voting family. On the show, she supports Trump. In real life, she supports Trump as well. But on the show, she supports Donald Trump. And I do think that Roseanne offered something when she had her show on 20 years ago and something now that we could learn from. And the lesson is that this is how these people think. This is how Trump voters, some working class voters, view their sort of situation in life right now. And Roseanne has been doing lots of interviews about her show. And one of the things she said yesterday was, anyone who watches Roseanne should see that we know life is a struggle for most Americans, and it did not get easier during the 20 years we were off the air. Let's face it, the issues we have in common and let's face the issues we have in common and help our families, neighbors, and leaders pull together towards solutions, please. And she said that is part of the reason that the show is doing well, which I think is something that, like, we as progressives should tune into. It's not the Bible, but, like, we should tune into to, like, get a little perspective that that's how these people think.
I agree. And also there was a recent New York Times piece that came out, I think either yesterday evening or this morning, and they quoted some ABC executives as saying, like, you know, we've done a lot of pushing as the American broadcasting company to highlight racially diverse voices, gender diverse voices, all kinds of things like that. But something that they felt that they had failed at presenting was economic diversity, which I agree. That's a wonderful thing to pursue, because economic diversity is something that really intersects at the intersection. It sits at the intersection of race and at gender and
100%.
Everything else. But my question is Roseanne really the voice that you want to represent this? Because she has all of these conspiracy theories and, like, terrible things that she supports in her personal life.
Yeah, no, I documented all of the dumb things that she said and very wrong thing that she said. Is she the perfect vessel? No, certainly not. But I also think that, like, there are those people out there that have these stories to tell, and I think that we should not give them credibility necessarily, but I think we should listen to them, because, as she says, life did not get easier for a lot of people over the last 20 years. And that goes for Republicans that were fed up with George W. Bush and the spending on the war or whatever it was. And then they were fed up with Barack Obama because, like it or not, Barack Obama was a very centrist, watered-down version of what progressive politics could be, and it pissed a lot of people off on both sides. But these middle-class people, they didn't see their life get better over either of those presidents. They just didn't. And so, like, I think that we as progressives live in a bubble, and I think that we look at all Trump voters as honking gomers a lot of time. And to be fair, there are a lot of them. And if you are a person that voted for Donald Trump and still support Donald Trump, I mean, I think you should be paying a little bit closer attention. But at the same time, I'm not sure the Democrats have gone forward and presented to them a better alternative. And so why did people vote for Donald Trump? Because he stood up there and he said, I'm going to give you this, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this. Has he delivered on it? No. Will he deliver on it? No. But I understand why people voted for him. I do.
I understand why people voted for him as well, but I do think that they didn't do their homework, which we had a discussion off air about this. I think that falls squarely on the voters' shoulders.
It does. I mean, you're right, but like it does fall squarely on the voters' shoulders, but it's also a problem that you can't necessarily fix.
But also I want to push back a little bit on the notion that Democrats gave nothing to look forward to, because remember, Bernie was running on the Democratic ballot.
Sure.
And by the time the Democratic National Convention rolled around, Hillary adopted pretty much everything that Bernie was pushing.
But she did a terrible job of selling it.
She did, but at the same time, there was something to believe in. And again, I think that it falls on the fact that people didn't do their homework necessarily. And I don't know.
Okay, well, all right. How do you fix that then? How do you make people do their homework? How do you make voters do their homework?
I think a lot of it comes down to effective communication, which, like you said, Hillary failed at.
That's my point, though. You can't force them to do their homework. You have to go out and make the case for yourself. That's what politicians have to do.
Sure.
And that's what Hillary Clinton, and I don't want to beat up on Hillary Clinton. I think a lot of Democrats have this problem. A lot of Democrats, like Barack Obama, was too scared to go up there and say, like, I will accept single-payer health care and nothing less. And if he had, and we had gotten single-payer health care, these Trump voters, these Trump supporters, these Roseanne Barr types, they would have seen how good it could have been for them. That's my point. You can't just say, wag a finger and say, you guys have to do a better job of brushing up on the issues.
I don't think
because they do have to do that.
But I don't think that it's finger wagging also when you have this brainwashing of the right from media outlets like Fox, where even if you stand up there and say single, like, I'm going to give you X, Y, and Z, free education for all, like $15 minimum for minimum wage. It's like they still sometimes push against that because they're like, well, no, because there's the core issue of guns and you're going to take that away, or abortion rights. Like, we don't want abortion. So anybody who supports that, no.
I can't think of one politician that's gone out there and put forward in the way that you just said that forceful of an argument. So their argument is weak, and so they get trampled by lies and miscommunication,
Bernie
like Fox News.
Sanders.
Oh yeah, look, but we know that what the problems were with Bernie Sanders. We know what the problems were with the DNC and all that type of stuff, right? And Bernie is also not a perfect candidate for all that we talk about him on this show, right? Like,
I love Bernie, but don't get me wrong,
But Bernie's not the issue. My point here is that I'm trying to make is you've got to speak to these people.
Yes.
You've got to speak to these people, and Democrats have not. Barack Obama did not speak to these people.
My question, though, is I think that we're kind of arguing the same thing. I just disagree that Trump really spoke to these people.
Okay, that's fair. I hear that point. What I would say is I think that Trump spoke to these people better than the alternative. And, like, look, I have to say, George W. Bush, son of a U.S. president, son of privilege, certainly part of the political establishment, right?
The cheer squad.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, people felt like they got completely rolled over by George W. Bush. Barack Obama, scary to a lot of people because he's black and he's got a weird name. And a lot of these people haven't figured out that the people who are really damaging their livelihood are not people of color, but rich white guys. And also, Barack Obama didn't make a great case for those are the people that are really damaging you, and focused a lot on social issues, but didn't address the real problem that a lot of Americans are facing. And I don't think Donald Trump is either, but I think it's so early in his presidency that they're willing to give him a little bit more of a pass. And so
I don't know, Peter, I know that the face of the Obama presidency was a lot of social issues. I mean, gay marriage, of course, passed. He was the greenest president that we've had. He really pushed for environmental concerns and regulations. But also, I mean, he became president after Bush. The economy was in shambles, and he brought it back.
He did, but he didn't bring it back for everybody.
Not for everyone, but he did what he could in 8 years.
I am not trying to take a dump on Barack Obama and say that he did a bad job.
No, but I think that it's a false narrative that he did only that he only took on socially progressive issues, because
that's not what I said. I'm saying I think that was the focus of what he was doing. But we saw a lot of job growth. We also saw a lot of people drop out of the job hunt. Like, a lot of people just completely stopped looking for jobs altogether. We saw wages were pretty stagnant. And look, Barack Obama didn't have a magic wand to fix all of that, but he didn't speak to that very well. He just didn't. And I'm not saying I expected him to come out and fix every single problem, and that's not realistic, but he did not speak to those specific problems, which I think is why we have the problem. That one of the reasons. I mean, there's obviously racism and sexism. That's a big part of it. But I think that's one of the reasons that we're in the situation that we're in. So look, I if you don't watch the Roseanne Show, that's fine. I'm not saying you have to watch it, but I think that, like, look, it's important for us as progressives to get out of our comfort zone, to get out of that bubble, to see and listen to the arguments from other sides sometimes. And maybe that gives us a little more perspective on where we should go and what problems we can address as progressives. So there you go.
Agree.
That's my take. So we agree? Ish. 36 minutes after the hour. Jack Jenkins from the Religion News Service joins us in just a couple minutes.
Download our podcast, search for The Bill Press Show on iTunes, and remember to rate, review, and subscribe. This is The Bill Press Show.
Hi, everybody. I am not Bill Press. I am Peter Ogburn. But if you watch The Bill Press Show, you see me here every day on Free Speech TV. Like it or not, the camera is always on one of us. But look, Bill is not here today, but I have a very, very, very exciting announcement. It's the last day of the Free Speech TV pledge drive. And to celebrate that, there is a huge challenge for you to meet. A $35,000 matching challenge by a pool of very, very generous Free Speech TV donors is in effect for today. I want to shout out a couple of people: Mark in Napa, David in New York, Jan in Washington, William in Washington, Andrew in California, Darcy in New Mexico, Francis in Nevada, John and Jean in Oregon, David and Barb in Colorado, John in Burbank, Mark in California, Ann and Barry in California, Robert in Port Orchard, Washington, Ed and Lynn in New Mexico, Peggy in South Carolina, Kathleen in Wisconsin, and Dee and John also in California. Together, they have put a match forward for you. If you call and donate or go to the website and donate today, they will match you up to $35,000. So, folks, you really, really have to go do it. And why would you do it, you might ask? Well, I actually have an answer for you. You know, I've worked in media for about 20 years now. This year, 20 years. And a lot of that time I've spent with Bill Press. But before then, I spent some time in the dark days of corporate media. And I have to tell you, we got our talking points from up above. We got our marching orders from up above. We had people constantly checking in on us and what we were doing. We had the message of what we were trying to put out influenced by suits and the corporations that wanted to try and please advertisers and things like that. But you know what? You know what's great about Free Speech TV? You don't have to worry about any of that. You don't have to worry about any of that. It's completely, totally free from any interference. We get to do what we want, and we get to bring you what we think you want. So, folks, it's really important that you donate and keep free speech going, because we could not do it without you. Truly, we could not do it without you. So what do? You call 877-378-8669, 877-378-8669, or visit freespeech.org. There are several different ways you can contribute, and you get all kinds of different goodies depending on how much you contribute. If you contribute $1,000, you get to come here to Washington, D.C. If you could come here on your own and have dinner with Bill and Carol Press and come here and watch the show the next morning. How cool is that? Plus, we got copies of Bill's book. We've got other things that you can win, bumper stickers, notebooks, things like that. Go check it out, freespeech.org or 877-378-8669. Call today for that $35,000 matching challenge.
Live video, Bill's commentary, the best clips from the show, all in one place. YouTube.com/The Bill Press Show.
It is the Bill Press Show, 40 minutes past the hour. My name is Peter Ogburn, sitting in for Bill Press today. Remember, we are on Twitter, at BP Show, at BP Show. I am on Twitter, at Peter Ogburn, at Peter Ogburn. A couple of different comments we got earlier. About my conversation about Barack Obama and what he did to speak to those voters. Lots of people have chimed in. Joey and UGR both chimed in to say Obama didn't do enough. 2 words, GOP obstruction. The GOP blocked everything, including Supreme Court seats, and Democrats just let them do it. You're right. You have to fight for every inch, not be afraid of what might happen. Democrats, stop overthinking every situation. Agreed. KG says, in my opinion, Barack Obama tried too hard to avoid the, quote, angry black man label and avoided controversial issues. So, yeah, let us know how you think, how you feel about the whole Roseanne thing, and on Twitter at BP Show. Well, my good friend, Religion News Service reporter Jack Jenkins is in studio this morning. Hi, Jack. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Great news. Apparently, hell doesn't exist. You knew I had to start with this.
Obviously.
I had actually asked you to come on for some other stuff, but then this happened after we had you booked. So I have to say, I have talked about it many, many times. I was brought up in a Southern Baptist church, and literally everything that I did that was good as a kid was so that I wouldn't go to hell.
Well, what I will note, you're referring to the reports that Pope Francis said that there is no hell. It's important to note that the Vatican has walked that back and said that that is not what he said, and that the reporter who is putting these words in the Pope's mouth has a very similar controversy occurred in 2015. So the source here is deeply suspect, especially considering the Pope is on record affirming that hell exists.
Okay.
But
hell exists. We're living in it.
Fair. But I will say that, like, the idea of universalism, the idea that everyone goes to heaven, as it were, that's the good version of universalism, as opposed to the other one where we all go to hell. Yeah. That is not an uncommon belief. There's an entire tradition, Unitarian Universalism, that ascribes to this view, or at least was founded on similar precepts. And I would be curious if you polled the global Catholic population, how many of them may have grown up with concepts of hell, but might not actually believe that hell exists.
Really?
So, I mean, like you find there was a controversy a couple years ago because an evangelical pastor, Rob Bell, there was a lot of talk about him writing a book or him making statements that seemed to imply that maybe hell doesn't exist or that everyone goes to heaven, and that led to a lot of controversy because that both resonated with a lot of American Christians and did not resonate with some of the leadership of evangelicalism. And that's just in the Protestant world. I'd be curious to see how those numbers are reflected in the Catholic realm, but needless to say, I don't know if the Pope. I doubt, and a lot of observers and reporters of Catholicism doubt that the Pope actually said that hell doesn't exist. But that doesn't mean that other Catholics might not believe that.
That's fair. Yeah. It's just so funny to me because, like, I having grown up in the church, it's been a long time since I've been to a church. But like everything that I did was beaten into me. Like, you got to do this, or you're gonna go to hell. Your soul will be damned for eternity. And that was really my only motivating factor for behaving. And so now, hey, what the hell? You want a beer? It's 7 a.m. Let's have a beer. We can misbehave. What do we have to worry about? Oh, God. It's just a fascinating story. Jack, I want to ask you about the March for Our Lives, which was this past weekend. A huge, huge deal.
Yeah.
Looks like it's probably the biggest protest that we have ever had here in Washington, D.C. 800,000 people took to the streets, which, wow, that's a lot. You were there, and you talked a little bit about how faith groups sort of played into this march, which I think is interesting.
Yeah. So for the size, it's still kind of weird to me how you're going to count the size of this versus the Women's March, because where the march was held off of the mall was like different.
Yeah.
But it is undeniable that it was mammoth.
Yeah,
it was an absolutely mammoth thing. And one thing I saw when looking through this expansive crowd was a lot of signs that were reflecting religion. And in my
there's a great sign, "Faith over Firearms,"
right,
that you had a picture of in
right.
in your piece, which is great.
The United Church of Christ put out those signs. But in my reporting, what I found was that I mean this. I honestly was put on, trying to find the God angle on the March for Our Lives, and I figured this was going to be, you make 3 phone calls kind of story where you get a few voices and you put it up there and whatever. Instead, when I put out the call to, are you involved in this? I was overwhelmed with responses. Churches from across the country, synagogues, mosques, everything were bussing people in for the march and participating in local marches. I remember I talked to one Lutheran pastor from New Jersey, and just from her conference, they'd sent 5 buses of people to the march, her group of churches. And the night before the march, on Friday evening, there was a vigil at the National Cathedral, and it was an interfaith vigil. And they had people who had lost folks in the Charleston shooting speak. They had the parents of one of the Parkland survivors.
Of course.
Their daughter, apparently the last night they spent with her was at their church, where she was the president of her youth group. And there was just a lot of, the next day I went to a Union for Reform Judaism gathering, and they had 3,000 kids there, including a large subset of Parkland survivors. There was at least 5, was the last count I heard, of the Parkland victims were Jewish. And so they showed up in force, and there were all these different faith things, and at first that seems perplexing, but I found out 2 things over the course of my reporting. One is that a lot of these churches and a lot of these faith groups were asked to be there or spurned to be there by their youth. So historically black church in Vienna told me like one of his youth group came up to him and said, "Hey, we're going to go whether or not the church is coming, and we would like it if you could come."
I love that.
But
man.
we're going to go, and
that.
we're just letting you know. And we saw similar things with some of these other faith groups, and so the youth seemed to play a really big role in exciting their churches. And the other part here is that a lot of people forget that in 2012, 2013, after the Newtown killings, the church, like just broadly speaking, the Christian church and then all these greater interfaith groups got really involved in the gun debate. The dean of the National Cathedral actually stood up in the pulpit and delivered a sermon in which he declared, the gun lobby is no match for the cross lobby, and like went all in on calling for gun control legislation. And so this whole network got built that was supposed to help bring about legislation, and they didn't. They weren't able to tip the scales. But it looks like years later in 2018, when these Parkland kids and this youth-driven movement really kind of reignited this conversation and have really been taking a leadership role, these other networks that have been built, both non-faith groups, but also these church networks and faith networks, have been activated, and they showed up in a big way this past weekend as well.
It's so cool because, a lot of churches that I grew up in and went to they had such a robust youth group or youth thing, and it was almost just like, this is where the kids go, where the adults do the grown-up stuff. But to your point, right? Like the kids see this, they realize it's a problem, and also, state of the obvious here, these kids have parents that want to see them protected, and they'll listen to their kids more than they'll listen to some ideological talking points, which so much of religion has become just ideological talking points, whether it's on something that is on its surface not a religious issue, like the gun issue. It almost feels like so many different churches and religious outlets are just political arms of the Republican Party.
Yeah, it's been the gun issue in particular has been interesting because it's one of the few places where some of these traditions, now the great outlier for a lot of this statistically is the white evangelical Protestants. The last poll I saw was 2013, so it's a little old data, but they are like one of the only major American religious groups that the majority didn't support more stricter gun control legislation. But like you've had when other churches, when some churches might have said, so for instance, after the Texas shooting, Robert Jeffress, advisor to the president and head of a pastor, he's pastor of a large Texas church. After the Texas shooting last year in Sutherland, he, was saying, well, in my church, where a third to a half of us are armed, and basically advocating for people to arm parishioners. Whereas other churches in Texas and in other parts of the Southeast have, over the course of the last few years, banned guns from their premises, like made a big point of that, because while they've been passing legislation at the state level to allow for guns to be carried on churches, they allow this carve out where if your church puts up a sign, you can't. And a bunch of Catholic churches, mainline churches, synagogues and mosques have put up signs saying you cannot bring weapons, firearms onto our campuses. And so now it's become this dividing line religiously where a lot of religious groups say, no, this is something we cannot abide. And they draw a distinction between security, having security guards, which is definitely a thing for a lot of communities like Jewish communities and Muslim communities that have had, and Sikh communities that have had their houses of worship attacked recently by various people, and actually having their people in worship with guns on their person. So it's become an interesting theological conversation where the voices for gun control seem to be a lot louder than the other side.
And I think so much of it has to do with the kids. I talked earlier about Laura Ingraham, who got in some hot water.
Yep.
Because of the things that she had said about David Hogue, who's one of the students from Parkland, who we've seen a lot. He's one of the higher profile kids. And she was mocking him for not being able to get into college with a 4.1 GPA, by the way.
4.2, wasn't it? 4.1?
4.2, whatever it was.
Whatever it was better than higher than mine.
It was better than what I ever had in my entire life. But then she tweeted out yesterday, on reflection, in the spirit of Holy Week, I apologize for any upset or hurt my tweet caused him or any of the brave victims of Parkland. So basically saying, because it's Holy Week, I'll apologize.
Now, did you see what his response was?
No.
Because this turned into an interesting theology fight.
Oh, boy.
Because she...
God, it's so great you're here today because there were so many theological fights out there yesterday.
So she only apologized after some of the advertisers started pulling from her show, which was something that David put on his initial Twitter response to her, saying, here are all her advertisers. And so some of them started pulling out. And last I heard, it was 6, 7, or 8 that have already pulled since then. And so she gave her response, in the spirit of Holy Week, upon reflection, et cetera, apologizing. His response was eventually saying, I don't really accept this apology unless you're going to also apologize for all the other things your network has done. And he's like, we need to love our neighbor as ourselves, again, referencing scripture. And
amen.
And then in progressive religious circles, the hashtag in the spirit of Holy Week became a thing for a little while, where people would say, well, in the spirit of Holy Week, I think guns are evil. And And so you started seeing that get picked up, where it's like her referencing that has become a theological flashpoint. It seems to have backfired in a way.
Every one of these kids from Parkland that I've seen take somebody on has gotten the better of them. Like there was Cameron Kasky, I think, took on Marco Rubio over guns in Florida the days after they had that CNN town hall. Just obliterated him. Anybody that steps to Emma Gonzalez gets completely destroyed. David Hogue has clearly made embarrassed people that have come after him over his grades. Come on, guys.
I mean, I will say it's been interesting, when I was doing the reporting for the stuff this past weekend, it was very clear that, these adults were really excited to be there with their kids for these faith-based rallies and stuff like that. But it was also really clear that in a lot of instances, the kids were running the show. And like that they have been, they've grown up in an era where they're trained to do this. They know how to be politically astute.
Yeah.
And like whether that's because of social media where they developed a political consciousness really early on, where my generation, the millennial generation, we had Columbine, so we relate to this. But like I was nowhere near as politically astute as a lot of these kids seem to be. And so if you're
also Columbine got just like, I mean, it was a big deal, but gun control and gun safety was not the issue. That's not what we were talking about in the days after Columbine.
Yeah, I mean, it was mostly just like this tragedy happened, and then you probably shouldn't play the video game.
Video games, Marilyn Manson, all this stuff. Like that was the issue. It wasn't about fixing the gun problem.
Exactly.
We just skipped over that part and got to the other stuff.
Exactly.
Which is ridiculous. Okay, we only got about 3 minutes left.
Okay.
So, Stormy Daniels has spoken.
Right.
Karen McDougal has spoken. Multiple women have come forward and have spoken. Summer Zervos has spoken. Are the religious right still sticking by Donald Trump? It's a question we talk about all the time here on this show, whenever you're here. Are they still with him?
Yeah. And if anything, there's been some data to indicate that support for him has gone up. I know a recent Morning Consult poll of among evangelicals that support has actually increased for Donald Trump. It's not clear if that's because of the Stormy Daniels controversy or if that was already ascending. But at the end of the day, there was this piece written in the Washington Post this past week by a group of scholars that were saying, look, for a lot of these evangelical voters and a lot of these religious right types, they see the world, they wouldn't identify as such, but they're effectively what's called Christian nationalists, where they fuse this Christian identity with their national identity. And that's not really about theology per se. For some of them it is. For some of them it's this idea that God is, can use imperfect vessels like Donald Trump. And is that as long as Donald Trump delivers on the agenda that they foresee, whether, Supreme Court justice, et cetera, they'll line up behind him. And then there's folks who just they might not have been to church in 20 years, but they have a cross on their wall and a Bible in their house. And if somebody calls them for a poll, they'll say they're a born again Christian. And as long as Donald Trump gives, what others would describe as lip service to, we're going to say Merry Christmas, et cetera, then that strengthens an identity. It's not really necessarily theology. It's like, this is who I am. Donald Trump represents that. I never expected him to be this saint to begin with, and it doesn't seem inconsistent with my theology because I don't really know what the theology would be to begin with. And so this group seems to have been in some ways transactional with the president. Where it's
a really good way to put it.
And so some will argue that, they're not being inconsistent. If he were to have an affair or do something bad as president, that's different than if he did it before his presidency.
There's a very interesting line of thought that came out with, I think it was Jerry Falwell that originally put it out there. It was just like, no. All these things that you're hearing about, these happened before he was president. None of this stuff has happened since he was president, and then that's okay, which, really?
Right.
That's the line we're drawing?
Right.
And so I think people just give him a pass.
And I think it would be, at this point, it's many religion reporters that I run into, they would be surprised to see a significant break at this point, not the other way around. Because it does seem to be, again, unless he's diverted from the religious rights agenda as president, which he doesn't seem to have genuinely done yet, there's probably not going to be an exodus of support for the president among white evangelical Protestants.
You've got such a great grasp on this stuff, Jack. You really do, and I love talking about it with you, especially in the days of Donald Trump. Follow Jack on Twitter at Jack M. Jenkins. Read his good work at religiousnews.com. He's a reporter for the Religion News Service. Thank you so much. Happy Easter. Have a great weekend. And we'll be right back with more of The Bill Press Show.
This is The Bill Press Show.
I wanted to find a bank with a purpose. I wanted to find a place that would take my money and not use it to cause the financial crisis, but to fix the financial crisis and to help end income inequality.
The people that we employ are usually clients right off the streets. They don't have an account, but Amalgamated is willing to get that started for them.
Their reputation of supporting the working man, I think, speaks for itself. This is a bank that cares for their customers, and I appreciate that.
we were able to access a construction loan through the bank's programs. And that loan has helped us house 28 families in the community.
Amalgamated is a bank that was started for and about working people.
Many of our customers have a deep commitment to advocating for social and economic justice. We share that commitment, and we're not afraid to stand up and say that we need to change some of the way that the country does business.
Giving you everything you need to fight the Trump administration. This is The Bill Press Show. Live at youtube.com/The Bill Press Show.
Hi, everybody. It is The Bill Press Show here on a Friday, March 30th. Thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. So much stuff to talk about. Just a reminder that we do have our podcast up. We put it up right after the show. So go take a look at it. Just look for The Bill Press Show on iTunes or anywhere that you get your podcasts. Just come, go check it out there. We've got it up for you. We put the whole show up. We cut the commercials out. We tighten it up and let you listen at like whatever is easiest for you. Like anytime that you want to listen, you can listen.
Bill Press Show in your pocket.
In your pocket. That's a great way to put it. Don't forget, we're on youtube.com/The Bill Press Show. So check it out. I am very, very lucky to be joined this hour by Deputy News Editor for Axios,
Hi.
Alexi McCammond. Hi,
So,
Alexi.
as of 2 weeks ago, I have a new title.
Oh, you have a new title? I knew that, actually. What? Tell me your new title.
I am now a political reporter
Political reporter.
Yes.
That's very cool.
Very excited about it, yes.
That's very cool.
Love being an editor, but and now doing political reporting full-time, focusing on the Democratic Party, which is very broad, and the midterm elections, which is also very broad, but exciting.
Congrats.
Thank you.
That's very cool.
Thank you.
I think you have a great perspective on the Democratic Party and how it runs and all that stuff. And
I've
the
been
politics of it all.
I've been so when I first moved to DC about a year ago, I was like, no one's really talking to Democrats, so I should start kind of talking to them. And now I'm obviously in a better position to do that, but it's been a long, exciting year, and I can't wait to cover the elections this year.
It's been a weird year.
Yeah.
That's for sure. We were talking earlier about the success of Roseanne's new show.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
So that's one of those stories that I just, tuned out yesterday.
No, that's fair.
I was just like, you know what? I have too little time and too many things to focus on. I don't know what's going on with this Roseanne thing, other than my brief knowledge is, the cast has a handful of Trump supporters.
Okay, well, she is not only a Trump supporter, she's like a conspiracy theorist. She's like a Pizzagate.
Good.
Yeah, no, she's totally insane.
I almost went to a concert last night at Comet Ping Pong.
Thank God you didn't.
I didn't.
Thank God you didn't.
I didn't for many reasons.
Yeah,
but that reminded me.
Smart.
Yeah.
I was actually in Comet Ping Pong the other day, which if you don't know about that, Google it. But you know about it.
Did you see there's a beer called Pizzagate now?
No, really?
Yes, but not related. It's just an unfortunate coincidence.
I love that.
Yeah, I don't know how they would know, but.
Yeah,
everyone should look it up.
So anyway, she's like a total conspiracy theorist nut, and so the whole idea is here's a show that represents Trump supporters in their natural habitat, and 18 million people watched. It's just fascinating.
Trump TV. It's finally here.
We arrived.
I was thinking about that the other day, talking to someone. Remember when everyone was like, well, if he doesn't win, he's probably just going to start his own TV show, network.
No. When he doesn't win. Everybody was convinced he wasn't going to win, and this was all a long con to get Trump TV.
And they started doing it or previewing what it would be like on Facebook Live, remember?
Yeah, I do.
And now I guess Roseanne is
and that was only let's see, that was during the election of 2016, so that was 30 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
It was several lifetimes ago that we talked about all that.
So long ago. And the amazing thing is, as soon as the midterm elections end, 2020 cycle will start.
Yeah.
So
oh no, totally.
We are.
And by the way, we ended up with Trump TV. Yeah. We have Trump TV. He's everywhere. They will not stop putting him on TV if they can help it. He's up there all the time.
You
and
can't
so in a lot of ways, he got the best of both worlds.
I know.
He won the presidency and he has Trump TV, constant coverage.
Yeah.
Really quickly, you can follow Lexi on Twitter. You have a new Twitter handle too, right? It's just Alexi, right?
Yes, it's so much easier now.
How did you get that? Just Alexi.
We have this guy who works with us. His name is Anton. He is like very plugged in. And I was like, Anton, I need to build my brand. The person who owned @Alexi hadn't used it since 2010, so they gave it to me.
All right, there you go. So follow her @Alexi.
Perfect.
We're going to take a really, really, really quick break, and we'll be right back. Jump right into it on the Bill Press Show.
On your radio, on TV, and online. This is the Bill Press Show.
We're back on the Bill Press Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am not Bill Press. I am Peter Ogburn. I'm sitting in for Bill today on a Friday, March 30th. It's Easter weekend coming up. I'm not a big Easter person. I celebrate it because I know that spring is right around the corner.
Yeah.
But I don't celebrate it for the religious reasons. I also celebrate it because I love candy.
Are you going to do an Easter egg hunt with your kids?
No.
No. They're too old, probably.
They're too old, and we've never really done Easter baskets with them.
Yeah. That's a good habit.
I did this story. Do you know how much sugar they cram into these Easter baskets?
Oh, no.
More than you think.
I don't want to know.
The average, I think I lost the story, but I'll find it real quick. The average, do you remember the numbers?
900 grams.
900 grams.
Equivalent to like 70-something chocolate chip cookies.
Or 23 cans of soda.
Oh,
That's the average
God.
child's Easter basket.
And it didn't include outrageous things. It included Peeps, jelly beans,
peanut butter eggs,
and like miscellaneous chocolate.
Oh my God.
On the scale of greatest candy that you could possibly eat, Reese's peanut butter eggs
so good
are at the very top.
They're
Peeps
so
and
good.
Cadbury cream eggs.
Peeps and Cadbury cream eggs are basura. Trash.
No, I agree with you. Except
Total
I
trash.
do like
Peeps are so bad.
stale
Awful.
Peeps.
You know what I did one year?
Stale Peeps.
You know what I did one year? Because I'm a fussy cook. I have one of those little brulee torches.
Yes.
So I got all the Peeps. I bruleed the Peeps.
Until they were incinerated to ash and then you threw them in the trash?
No. The top that's all covered in sugar turns glassy like a creme brulee, and the inside schmallow turns all gooey.
That's amazing.
Peeps upgrade.
I'm here for the Peeps, though. I just don't like the Cadbury cream eggs.
Peeps are, for the most part, pretty trash.
They're pretty bad. You should take a video of that next time and narrate like you're on Chopped or the Food Network. Here we have
a
delicacy.
The highly processed marshmallow product.
Notice the glassy glaze over the top.
I'm going to delicately glaze over this purple sugar? The sugar that is purple in defiance of God's will? A color not normally found in nature here on top of this candy?
Sadly, if you did it, I think it might get the most views of anything we've ever posted if you do it.
I'll do it this weekend.
All right.
I'll do it this weekend.
I'm not kidding. Do it.
I can't
I'm sure
wait.
we get some schmallows around.
I'm very excited to watch this.
It's so, and they're actually good. I'm not kidding.
After you torch them?
After you torch them. Because it's like a brulee, right? You got it's like a hard, glassy outside, and then the inside, warm marshmallow. Hello.
I love this. You should sell to Starbucks and convince them to make a new drink. Toasted Peep latte.
Peep latte. Toasted Peep brulee latte. Peep brulee
You
latte.
need to add glitter and color changing to it, and it'll be a bestseller.
Yeah.
All right. Starbbucks, if you're listening.
Howard, we're talking directly to you.
Call me. I'm telling you.
They were feeling very silly today.
Well, it's Friday. It's been a long week. I'm a little punch drunk
I
from
feel
the
like
week.
this is a standard show with Peter. We generally
Okay, that's
talk
fair.
about.
That's also fair.
We generally talk about candy. We poll our viewers about candy. I'm not kidding. Also, when Sabrina Siddiqui is here, we poll about candy.
I love that.
I end up talking way too much about food. In terms of food holidays,
Turkey Hotline Bling is the thing.
I do the turkey hotline at Thanksgiving.
I love that.
Yeah, which I nail the Thanksgiving meal every year. In terms of food holidays, Easter is top 10.
10's? That's
probably right at 10.
So that's the guy whose favorite holiday of all time is July 4th?
No.
That's not you?
No, that's not me.
Oh,
July 4th is in the top 5, by the way. July 4th is in the top 5. The number one, undisputed.
Oh, yeah. You're obviously a Thanksgiving dude.
Is Thanksgiving.
Very good.
Duh.
Yeah.
But Easter is close to, is in the top 10. Ham, you got like the spring lamb. You got some vegetables show up. Reese's peanut butter eggs.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
As a vegetarian, it's like my least favorite food holiday.
Oh,
Because it is those things.
It's
lamb,
all that stuff.
ham.
Lamb and ham
yeah.
and all that stuff.
But I did realize today, which is maybe too late in my life to realize this, that Easter brunch is a thing.
Yeah.
So, like, I'm from the Midwest. My family is a Midwestern family. We didn't do
eggs?
brunch.
Do you eat eggs?
Yeah.
All right, so lots of eggs.
So lots of eggs. I'll just have brunch all day.
Loads of eggs. Just a plate of eggs.
Yeah.
Worst food holidays, by the way? Do you have a submission?
St. Patrick's Day. Well, not really, because I guess it's a liquid diet that day.
The correct answer is St. Patrick's Day.
The
worst food holiday. Sorry, boiled beef and green beer and soda bread. Ugh.
Yeah.
Have you ever had soda bread?
It
doesn't even sound good. It's called soda bread.
Green beer, though.
No.
It's a no for me.
That's a no. That
I love
is
it.
It's a no for me.
No.
I think because of the Chicago thing, you know?
Yeah, no, I get that.
Get up early,
It's a big
you start
deal.
drinking green beer, you go to the Green River.
There were times in my life that I had many green beers. I don't do it anymore though.
One day I will be mature.
It's not a maturity
Old and
thing. It's not a
wise.
maturity thing. It's just at some point I'm like, am I really going to be the
Yeah.
aging stoner dad that shows up at the bar at 11 and like pounding green beers? It's not
That's
for me.
true. I didn't celebrate this year.
No.
I don't know if people here do.
You know what that's called? Progress.
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 All right.
All right, so we didn't just bring Alexi in to talk about the best and worst food holidays, although we could keep going with that. But I wanted to talk to you about some of the news of the day.
Yes.
First of all, you wrote about Paul Manafort.
Yeah.
One of our favorites. We try and keep up with Paul Manafort as much as we can, although there's a lot to keep up with these days.
Yeah.
He is trying to dismiss these charges from Robert Mueller.
Yeah. I have somehow just like fallen into the de facto person who writes about Paul Manafort at Axios. I think because I was just so fascinated by him when I first started there a year ago, and now I'm just like, I can't get out of it.
He's a fascinating character.
I mean, I want to make, even though I don't have the skills to do this, a Get Me Roger Stone style documentary about Paul Manafort. Like, there's so much about him that we don't know. But in any case, what we do know is that, like you just mentioned, he's filed his second motion to dismiss the indictments that Bob Mueller has brought against him, both in the D.C. court and the Virginia court. And I'm sure you've seen the headlines, but for people who are listening who maybe haven't, it was estimated by a judge that if Paul Manafort were to be convicted of all the charges brought against him in D.C. and Virginia combined, he would face up to 305 years in prison.
Damn!
That's a lot of
That's a lot.
time. I mean, yes, it's like a clicky headline, but like that is the amount of time he would spend if he was charged for everything. The likelihood of him being charged, with everything that they're bringing against him.
He's a rich white man. He's
not
going to do 300 years.
He's not, right. I think Rick Gates is facing like up to 6 years now after he gave a guilty plea.
Whoa.
So like that's like high, but it's low.
You can do that time.
Yeah, like he'll have a life ahead of him.
Totally.
But so the interesting thing about Paul Manafort is like he has this. I'm told, and my understanding is that he has a hearing for this Virginia court case April 4th, and then for D.C. April 19th. And his legal team, I was told, was not planning to file this motion to dismiss for the Virginia charges until after the April 19th hearing. This is all whatever kind of boring legal stuff. The interesting thing is that it shows that a couple of things. The main thing is that Paul Manafort and his legal team are not giving in and not pleading guilty, even though Rick Gates, his business partner, has weeks ago. And that they're going to keep fighting this by accusing Bob Mueller and the special counsel, as they have done in both of these motions to dismiss, of sort of violating the scope that he was given initially to look into Russian collusion and meddling in the election. All of the charges being brought against Paul Manafort thus far are from like 2014 and before. So they're really unhappy about that, and they're sort of using that as their main argument. I mean, the hearings are April 4th and April 19th, so we'll see what the judges say about these. The other kind of crazy thing is like Bob Mueller and his special counsel team have nearly unlimited funds.
Right.
Paul Manafort clearly has like a decent amount of money because
Sure.
he's still fighting, unlike Rick Gates, who I think was like, I want to have a life ahead of me and I don't have unlimited funds. But Paul Manafort is like going toe to toe with the special counsel, putting up as much money as he possibly can, I guess until he runs out. I was also told that like this fight from Paul Manafort's end might not be over for like many years.
That's a really interesting point, right? Like these things could go on for quite some time.
Like even if these motions to dismiss are successful,
Yeah.
I was told it could be like 3 years that
Really?
he's fighting. And
Oh
I'm
my
just like,
God.
I can you like you have a life, you have a family. Again, you don't have unlimited resources, financial resources.
Yeah.
Like I don't know how they're going to move forward. I guess we will see more after these hearings. But that's really like his
And this is
legal
just one
team's-
piece of the puzzle, too. Like Paul Manafort is just one guy.
Right. Right. Well, and now Mueller came out on Wednesday with this guy named Konstantin who worked in Paul Manafort's lobbying firm in Ukraine, who like served in the Russian military and was like bragging about having connections to like Russian intelligence officers and Russia, and they were in contact during the campaign. So this argument that Paul Manafort's legal team is putting forward, that, you know, Mueller is only getting after him for things from 2014 and before, will only last until this new thing with this guy Konstantin progresses, because they were in contact during the campaign.
Oh boy.
I mean, no one, like, that all remains to be seen, but like that changes things for his legal team's argument.
Political reporter for Axios, Alexi McCammond, joins us in studio. And as we mentioned before, you have been writing primarily about the Democrats. And it's a very exciting, interesting time for Democrats because I think a lot of progressives see this blue wave coming. We've already seen it happen in a couple of different states and a couple of different elections. But you have a piece, and I am fascinated by this. And this gets into what we were talking about earlier with the whole Roseanne thing, the whole Roseanne phenomenon. And it is, how do Democrats talk to their constituents, their base, their people? How do they get more voters to come to their side as opposed to the Republicans? And one of the things that you wrote about, I want to read directly from your piece. Says, quote, new internal polling conducted by the DCCC by Greenberg, Quinlan, Rosner Research suggests that Democratic candidates running in swing districts must express a willingness to work with the president when his agenda might help the district. The survey also recommends that Democrats not appear out of sync with what people believe about the economy. So there are a couple that you could read it a couple different ways when about the president's agenda, when it might help with the district.
Right.
What would be some examples of like when it might help the district?
So infrastructure is a big thing, but like he hasn't really moved forward on that. So that's a lot of
Wait, yesterday he talked about it. Ray, do we have that clip of him saying that what infrastructure really is? It's the first clip we played today. He spoke about this. I think he was in Ohio yesterday. Here he is talking about infrastructure.
To me, this is a very, very sexy subject. The media doesn't find it sexy.
Very sexy.
I find it sexy.
He finds it
because
sexy.
I was always a builder. I always knew how to build on time, on budget, and that's what we want here.
Okay, so he is talking about infrastructure, Alexi.
He is.
It's sexy.
It's so sexy. Last week was like the 6th infrastructure week we've had in 2018.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. But in any case, so that's one thing when I talk to like, you know, Democratic senators, for example, who represent states that Trump won in 2016, like Montana, Indiana, Missouri, North Dakota, some of those, they talk about how they align with Trump mostly on like infrastructure, and they want him to move forward on an infrastructure plan that like helps them, because that's what people in their towns really care about and their states really care about. So that's one thing, but that like sort of remains to be seen, because like who knows what the administration is going to do this year. Another thing that like they have to toe the line on is the tax law, I guess now. I keep referring to it as tax bill, and my editor was like, it's law now.
It's a law now.
The tax law, like, so that's something that this internal polling talks about a lot, because people are obviously seeing benefits in their paychecks from this tax law. At the same time, Democrats have a really hard time because they have to explain, like, you're seeing these benefits, but they are not going to last forever. They're temporary. And what will last forever are cuts for corporations and the wealthy. And that's obviously not going to help the middle class. So that's like something that I am fascinated by, because it requires so much knowledge, obviously, but then like how boring is that to be a voter and to listen to someone be like, well, no, let me explain how this doesn't last and this is the way it works, instead of someone like Trump or Republicans being like, these are the greatest tax cuts ever, look at the bonuses in your paychecks. Like, I don't know how Democrats will get over that immediate or almost short-sighted nature from people when they're seeing those benefits, except for explaining and really harping on the fact that wealthy people and corporations benefit the most.
I think you're right. It's not like infrastructure. It's not sexy. But I think Connor Lamb did a good job of this in Pennsylvania. He was against the tax law and saying exactly what you said. Look, it's going to be nice. You can go get a Costco membership this year, but it's not always going to be that way.
Right.
And what we need is real, serious help for people that like you, the people he was talking to.
Right.
On the infrastructure thing, it is really amazing how infrastructure is one of those things that Donald Trump promised he was going to address right off the bat, and he still talks about it sort of peripherally, but like we don't have anything that we can point to. And by the way, we're not going to get one anytime soon.
Oh, we're not at all. And like, again, like you were just saying, they were like at the outset of 2018, that's what we're going to focus on. We're going to get it done. And this time last year, they were focusing on tax cuts and this tax plan. And somehow, obviously, got it through. But with infrastructure, they're just sort of taking a back burner position.
And also, Donald Trump and infrastructure, I think one of the reasons that we've seen it have such a sloppy rollout is that infrastructure has been a Democratic issue. Democratic politicians have been talking about this for a long, long time because it means the government has to spend.
Right.
The government has to spend money to fix these problems. Barack Obama, part of his plan to fix the economy early on was to these jobs, these infrastructure jobs, which Republicans hated then and now love because Donald Trump loves it. But
right.
Wheel in the sky keeps on turning. Nothing changes. But I think Democrats can speak to that and make the argument that look, the United States government, the power of the government can do more than these corporations that we want to hand things over to.
Right.
Because they have the power of the government behind them.
Right.
And that's a Democratic message.
Yeah, and I think they'll have to, campaign on that. But the other thing that they're being advised to campaign on a lot is healthcare still. Like healthcare insurance premiums will be a big issue because those are expected to rise right before the election in November. Obviously, it's really easy. And, I interviewed Randy Bryce, the guy who's running against Paul Ryan the other day. Iron Stash.
Yes,
and
indeed.
He's very strategic in the way that he campaigns on this because he says he's running to repeal and replace Paul Ryan.
Yeah.
And I think that's a pretty clever way of talking about it because it reminds people what Republicans were trying to do even though they were unsuccessful.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a major issue. The economy is a major issue. And that's something else this internal polling from the DCCC shows is Democrats have to be wary of appearing out of sync with what the voters believe about the economy, which is that it is improving because it is. Now, they're not advised to go out and be the economy is improving. Trump and Republicans are totally responsible for this, especially because this polling also showed something like 40% of voters across all of these 52 swing districts credited Trump and Republicans for the improving economy. So not even a majority of voters do credit them.
Right.
So Democrats can use that to their advantage and sort of say, we get it, you're happy with this tax law. Here is how it's going to, not benefit the middle class.
Yeah.
We get you're happy with the economy, but here's how we can help make it better. So they have a lot of work cut out for them, but I think it's certainly not impossible. And again, after tax cuts, Republicans and the Trump administration are not moving forward on any major legislation. So that's all they really have going into this.
Yeah,
and polling shows that the approval rate for the tax law varies greatly across the country. So it's sort of that can't be your only thing you're campaigning on.
I go back and forth with the whole, with candidates saying I'll work with Donald Trump or I'll work with the Republicans versus saying I'll just shut him down.
Yeah.
Because I just don't know. I think it does matter district to district, right? Connor Lamb ran the kind of campaign he ran in Pennsylvania and he won. And I don't think he could have run that campaign in a more progressive area and won. I think he would have to be more progressive. But the whole idea of working with Trump
That's interesting.
It's really fascinating because the other part of that is you've got Trump who says things that we all know he doesn't mean.
Right.
Like with the gun control stuff. Like he's said flat out, I think we should take their guns first and figure out things later. Like God help us if a Democrat had said that.
Right. That's the tricky thing. And I think that's why this memo suggests like only if it's going to help the district. Yeah. They want candidates to run a hyper local race, which makes sense. They know that these districts voted for Trump, obviously not as much as, the district that Conor Lamb was running in voted for Trump, which is a good thing for Democrats after Conor Lamb won. Yeah. But there is like this amount of like a willingness to work with the other side while also holding him accountable when he does say things that are misleading or that he will not hold up, or things that are just flat out wrong or not good for the district. Yeah. So it's a lot of, I think that's the interesting thing for Democrats, whether it's talking about this tax law or the economy or like their willingness to work with Trump, they have to toe this really tight line. Yeah. And that's not to say they can't. It's just it makes their work even harder,
Yeah, totally.
But the other thing too is like you were just saying about progressives, and I wrote about this in the piece too, like Donald Trump's election as president literally brought out this like far left, very progressive activist wing of the Democratic Party in a way that like I haven't seen, and I think in a way that a lot of people haven't seen, right? And we see the power of protest and the way that people want the party to move farther to the left on many issues, especially inspired by Bernie Sanders and his platform. And so those folks are still running in these red swing districts. It just like they're probably not as viable.
Right.
But I've talked to progressives who are running in these districts and progressive groups who are helping candidates like that. And they sort of make the argument that like a couple of things. One is that districts might appear more red because a progressive has never run there before, which is like pretty optimistic, but also fine. And then the other thing is like if you put a progressive candidate out in a red district, you're at least exposing voters to a new set of ideas and ideology than they have been exposed to in the past. And that in and of itself is beneficial.
I'm one of those people, by the way, that believes that you could take a practically a socialist Democrat, right? Like just full on, and put them in a red state. And I think that if they stick to their convictions, like they might actually do okay because if you really get down to, if you strip away the wishy-washiness that we've heard from Democratic leaders over the last couple of election cycles, going back to Bill Clinton, you look at these people in these traditionally redder districts, just say, look, you want health care? We're going to give you health care.
Right.
You want to send your kids to school and not break your back and have to work until you're 80 years old? We'll do that too. Right. Yeah. And you know how we're going to do it? Because these people that are living high on the hog and that have taking advantage of you for all these years, they're going to pay more in taxes.
Right. Yeah.
And if they went out and they made that pitch, which is a very simple pitch, by the way.
Yeah.
You're making a lot of money. You need to pay more in taxes so that these people down here, they can get health care. They can send their kids to school.
Right.
Like they don't have they don't have to work 3 jobs just to find a way to pay for health care. I think that like that message resonates, and trying to be everything to everybody, which Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, all of the Democratic leaders on the national stage, a lot of the Democratic leaders on the national stage that we've had over the years, that's what they've been. And it's just, you can't sell that message.
Right.
You can't sell that message.
Right.
One other topic I want to ask you about before we have to take a break, gun control. Because we had the March for Our Lives last weekend.
Yes.
It's been a month and a half-ish since the shooting in Parkland, Florida. How big of a role is gun safety, gun control going to play in these upcoming midterms, which are going to be here sooner than we know?
I know. Well, especially there are a handful of really important primaries in May. Obviously, the rest are in August. I think we'll certainly see it then. I think this momentum is not going to end. We've seen a number of the survivors from the Parkland shootings considering openly taking a gap year from college and continuing this activism, which suggests even further that they're not giving up on this issue, right? Yeah. It's not going to just get swept under the rug. Another thing is like this kids all across the country have been so vocal about the fact that they are taking this issue to the voting booths, right? I saw a stat the other day that 4 million kids will turn 18 by the time the 2018 election comes around in November.
Wow.
And that's a very significant number. And I think that what we've seen in these rallies and just the fact that like younger generations are more progressive and growing up in this so-called Columbine generation where you are always thinking about a school shooting or a mass shooting in a theater or something in a public setting, I think this is something that they're keenly aware of and they're not willing to let it go. I think I mentioned earlier, we've seen the power of protest since Trump was elected. We saw that last weekend in the marches across the country. There were, I think, more than 800 across the world. And
wow, man.
They don't want to have representatives who don't align with them on gun control. And I wrote about that for Axios too, that like the one thing that Democrats and Republican voters agree on gun control is that they both, in equal numbers, something like 67% each, want their representative to reflect their views on gun control.
Okay.
Which obviously there are different views.
Different, yeah, but
that means that people want to have elected officials who are serious about this, especially those on the left side who want stricter gun control. And we'll see.
For me, it's very, very, very simple, and it's something that these kids have hit on that are protesting, and like the ones from Parkland that are specifically out in front. It's very, very simple. We have a problem with guns in this country,
right?
And I don't care where you fall on the political spectrum, you've got to admit that, right?
Yeah.
And I do think that even some Republicans are willing to admit we've got a problem with guns in this country, and so you've had lazy politicians over the years not get anything done on whether it's mental health or stronger background checks or whatever it is, right? Or outlawing assault, whatever it is. But you've had lazy politicians just not get it done, and these Parkland students just like, no, this is your job to get it done.
Right.
There was a great moment at the town hall where Marco Rubio was essentially saying like, look, we had this assault weapons ban and there was a loophole and it made it really hard. And they were like, it's your job to fix it.
Yeah. I think they
get up there and fix it, or we'll find somebody who will.
Right. They have a zero tolerance policy, and I think that's great. And
I do too.
I think the other interesting thing is, and like, I am certainly not calling for anything with NRA,
sure.
but I think that the interesting thing is like, the students are keenly aware of how much money the NRA is giving to these politicians. So while it is one thing to hold your elected officials accountable, it is another thing to then figure out like how to have productive conversations with the NRA and like see if they are willing to move on anything. They weren't willing to move on increasing the age limit from 18 to 21 to buy a firearm, which President Trump literally said himself he wanted to support until he met with someone from the NRA, and then, shocker, he doesn't support it.
Right.
But he did support banning bump stocks, which, shocker, the NRA supports.
Yeah.
So clearly there's like this weird relationship, whether it's money or just whatever, their influence. So I think that's the next step of it, is like seeing how activists can push the NRA to have like more productive conversations, actually find common ground, and maybe expand their policy platform to include other things like, again, raising the age limit or things that they want.
That is the voice of political reporter for Axios, Alexi McCammond. You can follow her on Twitter at Alexi and read her good work at Axios.com. Stick around for the rest of the hour. We'll be joined by Emily Atkin. She is from the New Republic. She is coming in here after a very, very quick break. My name is Peter Ogburn, sitting in for Bill Press. We'll be right back.
Live video, Bill's commentary, the best clips from the show, all in one place. YouTube.com/The Bill Press Show.
Hi, everybody. I am not Bill Press. I am Peter Ogburn. But if you watch The Bill Press Show, you see me here every day on Free Speech TV. Like it or not, the camera is always on one of us. But look, Bill is not here today, but I have a very, very, very exciting announcement. It's the last day of the Free Speech TV pledge drive. And to celebrate that, there is a huge, huge challenge for you to meet. A $35,000 matching challenge by a pool of very, very generous Free Speech TV donors is in effect for today. I want to shout out a couple of people: Mark in Napa, David in New York, Jan in Washington, William in Washington, Andrew in California, Darcy in New Mexico, Francis in Nevada, John and Jean in Oregon, David and Barb in Colorado, John in Burbank, Mark in California, Ann and Barry in California, Robert in Port Orchard, Washington, Ed and Lynn in New Mexico, Peggy in South Carolina, Kathleen in Wisconsin, and Dee and John also in California. Together, they have put a match forward for you. If you call and donate or go to the website and donate today, they will match you up to $35,000. So, folks, you really, really have to go do it. And why would you do it, you might ask? Well, I actually have an answer for you. You know, I've worked in media for about 20 years now. This year, 20 years. And a lot of that time I've spent with Bill Press. But before then, I spent some time in the dark days of corporate media. And I have to tell you, we got our talking points from up above. We got our marching orders from up above. We had people constantly checking in on us and what we were doing. We had the message of what we were trying to put out influenced by suits and the corporations that wanted to try and please advertisers and things like that. But you know what? You know what's great about Free Speech TV? You don't have to worry about any of that. You don't have to worry about any of that. It's completely, totally free from any interference. We get to do what we want, and we get to bring you what we think you want. So, folks, it's really important that you donate and keep free speech going, because we could not do it without you. Truly, we could not do it without you. So what do? You call 877-378-8669, 877-378-8669, or visit freespeech.org. There are several different ways you can contribute, and you get all kinds of different goodies depending on how much you contribute. If you contribute $1,000, you get to come here to Washington, D.C. If you could come here on your own and have dinner with Bill and Carol Press and come here and watch the show the next morning. How cool is that? Plus, we got copies of Bill's book. We've got other things that you can win, bumper stickers, notebooks, things like that. Go check it out, freespeech.org or 877-378-8669. Call today for that $35,000 matching challenge.
Live video, Bill's commentary, the best clips from the show, all in one place. YouTube.com/The Bill Press Show.
It is The Bill Press Show. Hi, everybody. Thank you for tuning in on this Friday, March 30th. We are on our way into the Easter weekend, so I hope you have big plans. If you don't, spend some time catching up on Bill Press Podcast. We have a podcast coming out this weekend. It's a Q&A with Bill about his new book, which is available. Just go check it out wherever you buy books. But I interviewed Bill about some stuff in the book, and we got questions.
It was so good.
We got questions from you, the listener, the viewer. We asked you for some questions. Anything you wanted to ask Bill, completely unfiltered. That podcast is coming out this weekend. So if you're not subscribed to the Bill Press Show on iTunes or anywhere else, make sure that you do so. Like I said, I am Peter Ogburn, sitting in for Bill Press today. You can follow the show on Twitter at BP Show. You can follow me on Twitter at Peter Ogburn. However, I wouldn't follow me. I'd follow the show first. But I am the fill-in host. I brought in some smart people to help me through this final half hour. Alexi McCammond, politics reporter from Axios, remains with me for the last half hour. Hi, Alexi.
Hi.
And joining us, the science and environmental politics reporter for the New Republic, Emily Atkin. You can follow Alexi on Twitter at Alexi. You can follow Emily on Twitter at Emorwee, EMORWEE, and read her good work at newrepublic.com. Hi, ladies.
Hi.
How's it going?
Pretty good.
I wanted to bring in two women who I think are geniuses.
Wow.
Bona fide geniuses.
Is it because I guessed correctly on the first try that St. Patrick's Day is the worst food holiday?
St. Patrick's Day is the worst food holiday, and that is only one of the reasons that you're such a genius. But I bring that up because, Emily, earlier this month, you wrote a piece that I saw got a lot of traction online about the sexism of the word genius. And this was all around the passing of Stephen Hawking, who, literally every obituary I read.
I really got raked over the men's rights subreddit for that piece.
Did you really?
Oh yeah,
I'm not surprised.
For real, yeah.
Hell,
men's rights, meninists.
Hell is men's rights activists on Reddit.
I was wondering why you called us geniuses, actually. I was like, is he going to bring up that piece? Because
well, I actually think that you were both very, very smart, but I wanted to sort of segue to your piece about the sexism of genius, because every obituary I read about Stephen Hawking was Stephen Hawking, genius, or the genius of Stephen Hawking, and blah, 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 blah. And you wrote about why that sort of might be sexist. Why?
Well, I'm not, first of all, just caveat here. Good morning, everybody. I
didn't mean to throw you into the deep end here. But...
Yeah, I'm not saying Stephen Hawking's not a genius.
Fair.
So I really just want to put that out there.
Fair.
Do think that in the technical use of the term genius, Stephen Hawking was, for certain, a genius. But I wrote this in the context of my work as a science reporter and somebody who looks at social issues in science, and one of the big remaining ones is still gender disparity in STEM, right? And what are the things, one of the biggest questions I asked myself in my reporting is, what are the things that are preventing us from getting the most, the best research possible in the U.S., right? When you want diverse perspectives, and you need them from women. And I just basically used the piece as a historical look at who has been called genius in the past and who hasn't been called genius. And I actually looked at research about the word genius and how young children perceive that word. And research across the board shows that even kids as young as 6 will associate brilliance and the word genius with male peers, and women, young girls, are reluctant to use that word to describe themselves. And so I just wrote the piece to point out the way that we use certain terms and how perhaps the use of that word has prevented some women from.
I thought it was great. I thought it was a great piece, and I think we're at a moment where, obviously there are a lot of people that are getting sort of left behind, and my biggest takeaway from the 2016 election was it is really, really, really easy to be completely sexist and get away with it. Breaking news. As a white man, I figured that out, everybody. So you should all, this is a big deal. But but it was so naked and so blatant in the 2016 campaign that I had gotten used to people calling it out. Not everybody calling it out, but some people calling it out, and it wasn't called out. And so I think it's a good point that you raised.
I mean, and I'm not saying that people who use the word genius are sexist. You know, it's to point out the historical use of the term in our society and just make people aware that there are multiple research papers that show the way that we've used this term in the past to describe only men, only male celebrity scientist, white coat, very stereotypical.
Yeah.
Scientists has actually been shown to harm young girls' perceptions of themselves as smart people. Yeah. And so then they are less likely to take up fields in STEM fields that are associated with brilliance, like physics, theoretical physics, like the field Stephen Hawking was in. They're more likely to go into things like archaeology, which is fine. Women in archaeology like more of them, but we want, obviously, generally, you would want women to feel that the sky is the limit to them.
Yeah.
Right. And there are so many of those implicit biases. You speak about young women being conditioned not to go into certain STEM fields. We see that with studies about any job. If women are looking at the list of qualifications for a job and they have 4 of the 5, they're maybe unwilling to apply. Whereas if a man is looking at it and he has 2 of the 5, he's oh, for sure, I'll apply. Yeah. And that, I think about that all the time. And I'm I'm
That's
going
a great
to do
example.
Everything that I can do and never tell myself I shouldn't, because men do whatever they want to do, and we should be the same.
Yeah, and it's just knowing. It's just knowing that gets you to apply.
Sorry?
Just knowing that, knowing that fact has gotten me to apply for jobs that maybe I wasn't fully qualified.
Yes, yes.
Sure.
I'm like, I have one of these things. I'm gonna go for it.
There are so many disheartening other aspects to this. Not to be like the rainy cloud here, but
here she is, the black
here
cloud. There she is, wet
this
blanket
ray of sunshine. Because there was a recent study that a lot of news outlets were writing about that very qualified, smart women actually were hired less than mediocre achieving women, even.
Amazing.
And even less than men who fall all across a spectrum of high achieving to low achieving to moderately achieving men. So it's not always exactly a one-to-one comparison, like do well, little girl, and you shall soar. Because also, like within the STEM field in general, I mean, there are all kinds of layers of bias, right? Like if you look at doctors, for example, the specialties that are predominantly staffed by women, like pediatrics, it's paid far less.
Yeah.
Or like if you look at STEM in general, oftentimes it's not necessarily just women and girls pursuing or having interest in STEM. It's that once they reach the lab, there are lots of different things that are keeping them from reaching that same level as the men.
It's crazy. And this is something I'm like fascinated by in all fields too. Like my undergraduate BA thesis was about women in political journalism and like their motivating factors for joining a field that is very male dominated, and then like the sustaining factors that keep them in it. And like there was data I think the New York Times conducted looking at like women bylines across all of these different beats, and like women were obviously represented in things like education and health and lifestyle, but totally underrepresented in like news and world affairs and politics. And then also like in journalism schools and grad programs, it's like 70% women, and then in the professional field it flips and it's like 40% women and 60% men.
A lot of that I think has to do with the willingness of the existing hierarchical structure of both science and journalism, which is very male. So like the hierarchy at the high level people right now are mostly male in those fields, right?
Right.
And it has to do with the willingness of those at the top of the hierarchy, the men, to take on female mentees. And that, you know, that's just, you have to be lucky, I guess, as a woman to get a male mentor in a very hierarchical field, like journalism, like science, and then get a male mentor who's not a total creep.
Right. Yes, especially in this climate is what
I'm going to say.
It's a Me Too moment.
Every time I come in here, I talk about, for the last 2 times, I've talked about stories I've written about sexual harassment and sexual misconduct in science.
I don't think those stories are going away.
No, they're not, and it's extremely rampant. I mean, and what we have is research there, like showing that something like 3/4 of women scientists have said that they've been sexually harassed in the field or otherwise and it's because of this hierarchical society. I was very lucky coming up in journalism and political journalism to have male mentors the whole time, older male mentors at higher up on the hierarchy, who were great to me, who their only motivation for helping me was to help my career.
Right.
And
but it's sad that you characterize it as being lucky.
Yeah, it is lucky. When you have somebody like Mike Pence saying that he can't even meet with a woman without mother being present. I mean, think about the implication.
That's so
no, it's funny, but it's a huge point. No,
seriously,
right.
Like, the vice president of the United States of America can't be alone with a woman in a room unless his wife is there. Like, setting aside the sexism, think about how many political careers that will stunt. Not even just stunt, but squash. Yeah. There is no chance that you can be a woman and succeed in this White House if you don't even have access to the people that you need to have access to.
Right.
I hesitate to even say anything because there are three very smart women having a very like
Peter, explain this to me.
Okay, look, ladies. Here's what you're missing. Okay, here's what the real story is.
Resident men's rights activist.
Yeah, I'll explain it to you. Oh God.
And one thing I do want to bring up is that a lot of people, even not the men's rights activists, when I published my story about genius and the way we use genius, the sexism of genius after Stephen Hawking's death, people accused me of using his death, to promote my political agenda. Yeah. And I just wanted to point out that Stephen Hawking was not a fan of when people called him a genius. He thought that it itself was a political sort of like stunt.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
He was just like he said at one point, people just want me on the it's like a media portrayal of like the disabled genius. He's like, it's BS. And then he also was somebody who spoke out, for women's equality in STEM, and he once said that women are even smarter than men. So I'm just saying.
Yeah, just saying what he couldn't.
Yeah,
after he passed.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Just saying what he said.
Well, it's a fascinating conversation that you started. I'm glad that you started it, and I'm sorry that you took all the grief for it that you did from men's rights activists, but also that means you're doing something good. That means you're doing the right thing.
Yeah,
when you stir that out.
I would also just like to say that the chat room, somebody said, this is how Peter's show always goes. It ends up with the ladies telling us men how bad we are, and I would like to say we are doing something right. But also,
yeah, that's okay. Yeah. That's all right. That's okay. First of all, nothing makes me happier than having women come on and like take control of the show and share that story. I love women. I have all their albums.
I have binders full of women.
I have binders full of women. All right. We need more women to come on and tell their stories on the show. Yes. But look, it's an important conversation, and it's also not going away. Right. That's the thing. It's just not going away.
Also, we're not necessarily saying what men are doing wrong. We're just pointing out these biases that maybe everyone participates in.
And
maybe women are calling.
Sure.
Totally. It should bother you more as a man to hear, people that you consider equals are being mistreated by other men than it should to hear like a man did, and you're like, well, I'm a man.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's very good.
That's a very, very good conversation. I do want to switch gears a little bit because you also wrote about the conservative coddling of Scott Pruitt. You are the science and environmental reporter at the New Republic. We've talked to you before about Scott Pruitt. Scott Pruitt, man, he's a weird one. I have a really hard time figuring out how he took over the EPA, which is an organization that he hates and would like to see done away with. But, he's one of these conservatives, and there are several of them in the Trump administration that are just spending their way into oblivion. Like, they are just spending so much money. And what's the latest with Scott Pruitt? It's only getting worse.
The article that you cite, the conservative coddling, the alliterative headline of Scott Pruitt, has to do with the latest sort of version of Scott Pruitt defending himself over all these stories about him spending a lot of taxpayer money on first-class flights. So I don't know if you've heard about that, but there have just been a number of stories over the last couple months, spearheaded by the Washington Post, that for basic domestic flights from, D.C. to New York, round trip, Scott Pruitt will spend something like $2,000 on a first-class flight. Routine $3,000 to $4,000 round trip flights to Oklahoma, Alabama, to do basically just media tours, promote the deregulatory regime. There was a high-profile trip he took to Rome for the G7 over the summer that was, about a $120,000 trip, involved a private military jet that cost, something like $36,000 to take him from Middle America to, an airport on the coast, and then, the first-class flight, multiple thousands of dollars. He has a huge security entourage, stuff like that. Anyway, I wrote this story because the latest defense that Scott Pruitt has been using, he's been going on a conservative media tour, conservative radio tour, to say, well, Obama's EPA heads, they spent $1 million on travel, on international travel, and I only spent $100,000, so they've spent 10 times as much as me.
Wow. What a hawk.
And then the conservative hosts and all these outlets that have been publishing it are like, yeah.
That's the ticket.
And one host, Lars Larson, a guy based in Oregon, said something like, well, that sounds pretty conservative to me, and the problem is
Lars Larson.
The problem is, first of all,
it's 15 months into the Trump presidency, and I'm guessing that $1 million was over
8 years.
8 years.
8 years, 2 administrators, 14 international trips, compared to one international trip that Scott Pruitt took once. And if you do his 2 international trips, that's actually $160,000, but who's counting? And that story that, Obama's EPA administrator spent $1 million on travel over 8 years. Those are based on documents that EPA's political people shopped around to other journalists saying like, hey, you should publish this story about Obama's EPA people. Nobody took the story until Free Beacon took the story. Then Fox News aggregated Free Beacon's story. Oh, wow. And now Scott Pruitt is going on conservative radio touting this story as a defense. And it's a story that he created, and it's a story that's actually just disingenuous comparison, because not only is it a 8-year Obama to 1 year Scott Pruitt comparison, the controversy is about his domestic travel. It's not about international travel.
Right.
We're talking about your first class trips to places that you don't need to take first class trips to. Right. We're talking about the fact that you use Delta Airlines all the time, even though that's not a preferred carrier of the United States government. You're talking about why do you always book really expensive hotels domestically. This isn't about international travel. So it's a red herring. It's disingenuous. Right. And the reason I wrote this piece is because I don't understand why. I expect Scott Pruitt to do this. I don't understand why every single conservative media outlet just allows Scott Pruitt to have this defense when they're the ones who are supposed to be advocating against taxpayer waste. That's the purpose of conservative media. I think there is a purpose for it. They advocate for a certain class of people. So that was sort of my point, just to be like, WTF.
At what point does this catch up with, or does it catch up with some of these Republicans? Because Scott Pruitt is not the only person who's been accused of this and has been doing this. Like, it's pretty rampant in the Trump cabinet. So, like, Republicans had built this whole narrative of being spending hawks and, deficits are bad, and Barack Obama, because he took a vacation with his family and his mother-in-law came along, should be impeached because it's too much money. Like, at what point does this catch up with them politically, Alexi? Or does it?
I don't know if it does. Yeah. I think the numbers are staggering, especially with Scott Pruitt. I think the Ben Carson story is interesting, but I think most people look at that and they're sort of like, well, Ben Carson won. What have you even been doing at HUD? I didn't know you were still working.
Ben Carson has not opened his eyes since the election. Like, he has kept his eyes closed the entire time that he's been
Yes, and it just seems like...
Meanwhile, Betsy DeVos has not closed hers since the election. But anyway, go ahead.
It just seems foolish and reckless, and I think that's how people view it, right? Like, whether it's Scott Pruitt just like seemingly not understanding that these things are maybe not what you should be doing, or Ben Carson being like, I didn't know the price of this $31,000 dining room table. Oh wait, my wife did it. Oh wait, I don't know what happened.
Wives.
Yeah.
Wives,
right?
ladies be shopping.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You know how they be like.
So I don't know. I don't know what people care about anymore. I think this is not gonna affect them.
Well, it's so funny because when Tom Price with the HHS, the stories came out about him spending too much on travel, and that was enough to get him fired.
No, it wasn't, because Trump already didn't like him.
Sure,
and
fair.
Trump loves Scott Pruitt. I mean, there's this new campaign by, Sierra Club, NRDC, Green for All to #boot Pruitt, and they bought all these ads on, Morning Joe. You might even see it. We have Morning Joe up right now.
I'm sorry, I have to interrupt because on CNN, John Bolton's sweet stash stealing the spotlight.
Well, now it is CNN.
Excuse me. He is a war-drunk old man. I'm sorry, we don't have to praise his mustache choice. Anyway.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. I'm
that's
sorry.
Not objective journalism.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but that completely threw me.
Yeah, that's really funny. And is that Yosemite Sam?
That is Yosemite Sam. Yeah, right. Yosemite Sam.
But yeah, I'm just saying, this campaign to kick Pruitt out of office, it's on national television now, spending all this money in these groups. I don't know. I mean, listen, maybe it'll mobilize some people to be like, yeah, I should be against this guy or something. But also, I feel like Trump is just going to love it. I mean, he already liked Scott Pruitt. I think he's going to, take him by the, take him by the neck and pull him even closer. Be like, yeah, that's my guy. They got all the libs against you,
Spinning us into oblivion to own the libs.
And Scott Pruitt, I mean, is widely considered to want to run for office one day, to have much higher political ambitions, potentially want to run for president. There's this campaign to boot him out of office. I can just see the campaign ad now.
Yeah.
A year from now, it's just with Scott Pruitt's face, just like, liberal environmentalists tried to kick me out of office to prevent law and order at the EPA. They failed.
That's pretty solid.
That's very good.
That's a very, very
Thank
good.
you.
I appreciate it. Okay, unfortunately, we're out of time, ladies. I mean, on that note, we're going to have to leave it there. By the way, the comment of the day came from the chat room when we're at youtube.com/The Bill Press Show. Please send Donald Trump a copy of this video to show him how smart women who are not submissive, at least not politically. See? So, Alexi, Emily, Ray, thank you.
Time.
Great show. We'll see you on Monday.
This is The Bill Press Show.